recording.
going?
It's
Now I'll do the slides
thank you.
once I find them. Sorry. Because there they go. They're disappearing underneath my bar, which I have to move. Okay. There's somebody in the waiting room.
Yeah, I let them in.
Thanks, Cynthia.
Thank you.
All right, let's get going then. And I've Adam, I've got
So-
closed captioning on. Can you see it?
Stop. There we go.
Great. So we expect tonight to run, we're planning for about an hour and a half at the most. So hopefully by around 8:30, we should be wrapping up. And we are recording, just so you know. We're not circulating anything, but we will share recordings upon request. And could you raise your hands if this is your first session?
Let's go to.
It's probably not, but
Yes,
Anybody in a full session or first session?
yes.
Okay, so it's Mark. Hi, Mark.
Hi, Mark.
And Ameka. Is it Ameka or Amika?
It's a mecca.
Ameka. Thanks.
Welcome.
So if you could you rename or in your name, could you identify which parish you represent? Tonight at last count, we have registered 22 churches, and should be 25 or 26 of us here tonight. So welcome to all. So
Are you fine with my church name, or do you want me to write out the whole name?
Little T is perfect, Adam. That's how
Yes.
we know you.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
So Elizabeth, if we could go back to the land acknowledgement slide, please.
Sure.
First off, let's welcome our team. This is our organizing team, and we especially want to welcome the Reverend Tay Moss tonight, who was with Church X in Toronto. And he's also the honorary associate at St. John the Baptist, Norway in Toronto. So welcome, Tay. And Tay will be our guest speaker this evening. So now let's go to the our traditional land acknowledgement.
Well,
Well,
that's
first
the next slide.
let's talk. So more specifically, what we're talking about tonight is for those of you who want to talk specifically about technology and nuts and bolts. And it's for us techies who are leading and supporting or championing technology in our Anglican churches. And those of us online are solely those who did receive a REACH grant from the Toronto Anglican Diocese. So, okay, let's go to the land
Yes.
acknowledgement.
Sorry for that, David.
No, that's no problem. The land on which we virtually gather is the traditional territory of the Wendat, the Anishinaabe Nation, and Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Mississaugas of Scugog, Hiawatha, and Alderville First Nations, and the Métis Nation. This territory was the subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Iroquois Confederacy and the Ojibwe and allied nations to peaceably share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. We offer our gratitude to the First Peoples for their care for and teaching about our earth and our relations. We honor these teachings and commit ourselves to live peaceably together in a spirit of respect and reconciliation. And I'll call upon Elizabeth to lead us in a short prayer.
Yes. Oh, Creator God and Lord of all, we thank you for the hidden forces of nature now brought within our control by scientific discovery. We thank you for the creative vision in this Zoom room and the inventiveness that you have given the people here, and for the different abilities and skills which you have given us and which we use in our daily work. Help us to use all our gifts of technology wisely and faithfully for the benefit of humankind, that all may rejoice in your goodness through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
So again, here's our Zoom etiquette slide, just some do's and don'ts while we're on Zoom, especially if we have questions or want to speak. please raise your hand and we'll recognize you and give you an opportunity at that time. We encourage you also to use the chat. You can use it one-on-one with somebody or a general comment to the whole group. Mute your microphone whenever possible. Make sure your camera is on. And as we said, there is recording in process. Oh, here comes someone else.
Got him.
Thank you. And when you speak, please introduce yourself. So thank you. Let's go up to the next slide. So here's some, we did a survey or the Jamboard, I believe in session 1, and here's some of the, the issues that were identified from a technical standpoint. That night, I think we had 100 different sticky notes that were put up, and a vast majority of them, over 60%, were technology related or techie related. So here's just some of them, and you're familiar with all of these. A big one that came out of this was quality of sound and audio issues. So next slide, please. So because technology is such a vast subject, we decided to focus tonight on audio quality. So our primary focus tonight is audio. And Tay will review the basics with us, standard operating procedures and best practices. And then we're going to give you an opportunity to discuss and ask questions and get answers. And if we don't have the answers, we'll follow up and make sure you get them. And also, please raise your hand when you have that question or comment in the Zoom chat. Okay.
Oh, I
Oh.
guess not that, not yet.
No, we're ready to transfer over to Tay. And again, welcome to the Reverend Tay Moss, who is at ChurchX, which is a joint project or venture between the Anglican Church of Canada and the United Church of Canada to get involved in technology training. And from what I know of Tay, we weren't born yet, and Tay was live streaming. Just joking, but Tay is well-versed in technology and especially was live streaming well before us COVID adopters of live streaming were about. So he comes well-versed and able to talk to the subject. So welcome, Tay, and over to you.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Happy to be here. So I am indeed a tech nerd from long ago. I got my sort of initial training and doing tech stuff really actually with audio, doing sound engineering for bands in college and stuff like that. So I cut my teeth on Mackie soundboards and stuff like that long before I was doing video. So this is a kind of special passion of mine, doing sound for live streaming and for worship services. So I've got a couple different things to talk about. My basic learning goal for tonight is that I would hope that wherever you are on your journey of development of your sort of tech skills and the quality of your audio production for live streaming, that we would take you kind of 1 or 2 steps beyond where you are right now. So if you are kind of at a very basic level, great. We're going to sort of maybe give you the skills to go the next level. If you're at a very advanced level, then we may give you some ideas about things that you might do to improve your quality even beyond that. But the basic premise here is that wherever you are on that journey, it is a journey. And it's a kind of one of these like adoption curves where, you never quite get to infinity. You never quite get to the perfection of unity with God, but you sort of get closer and closer with every step you take in a kind of diminishing balance of returns. So let's just start with a couple of basic considerations. So, in the beginning, there was the word, right? Like, most churches have been using some sort of reinforcement for the spoken word in their worship services since actually before medieval times. Like you look at the design of churches, and acoustics was a consideration in the architecture, right? There was technology in the consideration of the design of these buildings. You can see in some older churches things like reflectors, like Church of the Redeemer used to have this, it doesn't anymore, but like a reflector behind the pulpit that was designed to take the audio signal and to amplify it into the space. So in fact, church has been in the business of amplifying the spoken word for a very long time. And with the invention of digital ways to do, sorry, not even digital, but analog ways to do this with amplifiers and speakers and things like that, we started to see the adoption of those technologies. And then, of course, when COVID happened, it just kind of lit everything on fire as far as this goes. But even when COVID happened, like most churches already had some kind of PA system installed and maybe a little bit of expertise in the congregation about how to use it. So, general considerations. I mean, what do the clergy and congregations say about audio, right? Whether, live streaming. The congregation's perspective is, can we understand it? Like, do we like literally understand what the people are saying? That's like the first thing. And the second consideration is it beautiful, right? Like, does the quality of especially the music in this case, sound good and attractive? And is it like immersive for the people that are participating virtually? Do they feel like they are moved along in the worship by the beauty of it? So it's kind of those two things. As far as clergy are concerned, the first kind of primary concern is just make it work. There's this kind of like I just want it to work, when they show up and especially on a Sunday morning when there's so much on their mind and things are getting anxious and like, oh my God, like last Sunday, let me give you an example. Last Sunday at St. John the Baptist, it was like 7 minutes to the service, and the guy who normally runs the audio board wasn't there yet. And I could see that Molly Finley, the rector, and the curate, Johan, were at the back by the soundboard. And I'm like, I better go over and see if they need help. So I walked over and they were kind of getting things configured. But I said to Johan, has anybody turned on the cameras yet? He's like, I don't think so. So like I started turning on the cameras and stuff. And then I circled back to the soundboard. Guy still hadn't shown up yet. It's like less than 5 minutes to the service. Johan had basically set everything and unmuted all the microphones so that the board would just kind of sit there, and he went down to the basement. And so I'm in the back there and I'm trying to get the live streaming, like, logging onto YouTube, doing all that stuff, less than 5 minutes, right, to the service. And I'm like, holy shit, sorry, I did not say that. Anyway, I'm like, we got to get this going. So I'm like, and meanwhile, we start hearing interference on the audio, right? Like in the house audio, like, psh, 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 psh. And so Molly runs to the back and she's like, what's going on? What's going on? And I look at the board and like, I'm just like trying to diagnose immediately what's wrong. I see that what it is, this is, so Molly and I do two things simultaneously. I mute the mains and she mutes Johan's microphone. And then I see that she was correct, that it was Johan's microphone that had the interference. And she's like, can't figure out what's going on. And it took us actually, it was another like 5 minutes before I realized what happened was he had left the sanctuary. And so his transmitter was out of range of the receiver. So the receiver was just picking up whatever audio it could on that radio frequency and putting it into the system. So that's what happened. He walked out of the room, right? But yeah, this is the kind of thing that is the nightmare of clergy. Like clergy literally have dreams about the audio not working and they can't find their prayer book and stuff like that. So they just want to make it work. Their next consideration is this something they have to fix? I mean, that moment when Molly went to the back of the church to the soundboard and like muted Johan's mic, like, again, like, I mean, she knows how to do that. Most clergy do not. And so they're going to be like, oh my God, do I have to fix this? Do I have to get involved? And the third consideration is it expensive? And there we're talking about like, not only the expense of like buying new equipment, potentially like a better wireless mic system or something like that, but also, is it going to require volunteer time and resources that the clergy might want to spend on other things? Like the guy who runs the soundboard at my church could potentially be recruited to do something else. Like he could be somebody who was, doing youth ministry or something else, right? So there's that expense, right, as well. Okay, so those are the two kind of like big, things that are of general consideration for like clergy and people. So we as digital vergers, or whatever language you want to use for us, what do we do to sort of fill this gap and to do ministry in this thing? Well, I would suggest that trying to get audio excellence is a kind of never-ending journey. And you kind of progress along that journey by kind of continually refining your processes and your equipment and what you're doing and configuration, all those things. So I made this basic kind of flow chart of considerations here. So the first kind of thing to consider is, are you doing Zoom, a live stream, or are you pre-recording your video and audio to like, post later? Okay. So if you're pre-recording it, then, you know, my first question is, are you doing multi-track recording in a post-production mixing workflow? That's a lot of words.
Yeah,
But the basic idea there is like when you're recording the worship service to be, you know, edited together later, are you preserving in that process the different audio tracks? So you have like a recording of the sermon audio from a microphone that's on the preacher, separate from some sort of a microphone that you have near the choir, separate from a microphone that you have, you know, recording the congregation singing and so forth. So that when you're doing the editing process, when you're in the post-production, they call that workflow, are you mixing those audio sources to get the kind of optimum quality of audio? So, okay, so that's in the pre-recording. If you're doing Zoom, my first question is, are you using original sound settings? And I would also add to that, do you have noise suppression off? Because those are really important if you're doing Zoom for like a worship service. If those things are yes, or if you're doing live stream, then the next question is, and I'm going to go through some more of these in detail in a minute, but are you taking the sound from the mixing board, or are you solely relying on the microphones in your cameras? Okay, like, because you're going to get a much better quality and have a lot more control if you're sending your audio through something like a soundboard, where you can control all these different, you know, relative levels of these different sources and mute and unmute things and so forth, versus getting into just using camera sources. Next consideration, are you separating your live stream audio mix from your main audio mix? So the main mix, or also known as the house mix, is the mix that goes, let me just put this, you know, when we're talking about the house mix, that's the mix that goes to the amplifiers and gets heard in the room. But almost every mixing board that you're going to come across has the capability of doing auxiliary mixes that are separate audio mixes that go to, they're designed to support things like an audio monitor that's like up on the stage for the musicians or the clergy to hear, or it could be used for like a sound, you know, reinforcement system for people that are hard of hearing, or it could be used for recording, or it could be used for live stream. So virtually every soundboard is going to have that capability. Are you using it? Or are you just splitting off the main mix from the house mix that goes to the room and doing that? Okay, those are two different options. All right, the next consideration, do you have some microphones that are streaming only? And what I'm talking about there is like, okay, so you've got a microphone on your podium, you've got a microphone on your clergy. Do you have some microphones that do not go into the house mix? They're not heard by the congregation in the room, but are only there to pick up those ambient sounds and those other sounds and to send them to the live stream. Examples: piano, right? You know, piano is one of those instruments that, you know, yes, you can have a microphone that's 30 feet away from a piano, and it will record the sound of the piano, but you'll get a much better quality of a sound of a piano if you have like 2 or 3 microphones, or at least one microphone closer to that piano. Why? Because one thing, pianos are a percussion instrument. Actually, they're a percussion instrument where hammers are hitting a string, and that sound of that felt impacting is like one of these things. It's like a subtle kind of color of the sound. So the best kind of like microphoning of a piano usually comes from at least like 2 or 3 mics, one of which is like pointed at where the hammers hit the strings, right? So you see what I'm talking about, like levels of refinement. Like how do you get that sound of that hammer hitting the string? You got to have a microphone nearby, because the sound of that that hammer hitting that string doesn't travel very far. It travels enough that like people know that from their experience of hearing piano performances, but not far enough that it's necessarily going to be picked up by a microphone that's 30 feet away. Okay, so do you have some separate microphones that are picking up things like pianos, organs, choir singings? So the choir at a church like St. Mary Magdalene's is actually at the back of the room, and the microphones that they use are at the front of the room, right? They're all the, picking up the podium, picking up the preacher, picking up, all these things. So they don't get a very good audio of the choir, right? Just with what they've got, so, and the choir is loud enough. It's like, 15, 20 voices that they don't necessarily need to have it amplified for purposes of performance in the worship service, but they do need to be able to pick it up for purposes of live streaming or recording. Okay. So that's what I mean when I say, do you have stream only mics? Okay. The next thing, in this progression, and I'll go through all these kind of in more detail as we go on. Are you dynamically mixing during the stream? Meaning, are you listening to what's going out to the live stream, and are you making adjustments on the fly? because as much as we might like to think that people are consistent, they are not consistent. Your preachers are going to go louder, or like, here's a good example. You know, you might have like a microphone placement, like a lavalier microphone, and then, you know, it sounds good one Sunday, and then the next Sunday somebody puts a chasuble on top of it, or like something else, and now the level of that is lower, right? So you've got to be like listening and making these dynamic adjustments, or even during a worship service itself, you got to be able to make these adjustments, you know, on the fly. You know, a good example of this, kind of in the extreme case, I saw a video that was like a half-hour video given by the guy who does the audio for the Hamilton production in Manhattan, like in you know, on Broadway, and he was demonstrating how he live mixes the show, and he has all his fingers on the faders, and he's like dynamically doing the fader levels on the fly for a live production of Hamilton. And now I had thought that would all be like digital, blah, blah, blah. No, there's a dude who has fingers on those levels, okay, and is dynamically adjusting them, because there's just too many factors that adjust that determine how loud something is on the day of production, at the event, at the service. So that's my next question. Are you actually dynamically, like, are you like listening and making adjustments, you know, on the fly during a worship service? Okay. The next level of refinement after that would be channel and mix level audio processing. All right, so this is, again, kind of very subtle, but kind of the next level. And the thing would be like, are you using EQs? So your highs, your lows, your mid frequencies, are you kind of sculpting the sound? Now there's the level of doing that for the whole mix, like your kind of output level. And then prior to that, on the individual channel levels, are you doing, you know, adjustments, you know, of all these different sort of effects, which I'll get into in a minute? Are you doing all those like on a level of like each of those audio sources, and then getting a sum that you're then also processing? Yeah, it gets subtle, but it makes a big difference. I mean, I remember when I was, you know, a kid, when I was like in, you know, 18, 20 years old, you know, like attending, you know, like learning from a really good live audio engineer, and he had a whole rack that was about 7 feet tall of just equalizers. And I said to him, what the heck is that? And he said, well, for each microphone that he had on the stage, he had a different graphic equalizer, right? Yeah, so he had sculpted each of these based on the microphone, based on that particular singing voice or that particular instrument or whatever they were making. He had a different EQ for each of those as a channel insert, so that the microphone would go through that before it even got into the proper like mixing board. So, I mean, I was impressed. But nowadays you could, of course, do that. If you have a digital board, you can do that digitally. You don't even have to do it anymore with like a rack of processors. So that's what I mean when I say mix level and channel level stuff. So we're going to talk about EQs. We're going to talk about dynamics. And you know, when we talk about audio dynamics, we're usually talking about the dynamic control of the gain level of the audio signal. So gates, limiters, compression, and then finally effects. You know, we're talking about like reverb and flanges and stuff like that. We'll get into that in a minute. Okay, so that's the never-ending quest, is like wherever you are on that journey, okay, whether it's that you need to like add additional microphone to pick up your choir, or whether you're talking about how do I use a flange effect or a choral to kind of round out my sound, stuff like that. Wherever you are on that journey, I'm hoping to take you from like step 3 to step 4 tonight, okay, with this. And if you're at a step like 1 to 2, and like some of the stuff is over your head, I'm sorry, not sorry, because what I'm doing is I'm introducing concepts that'll be useful for you later on when you do get to the point where you're asking questions like, what is compression? Or how do I make the sound level more even? Because it sounds like, you know, the pastor's really either really soft or really loud? How do I prevent, you know, even them out, right? Questions like that, there's an answer for that, right? So we're going to talk about that. Okay, so I went through all that. Okay, all right, so let's talk about some more advanced sort of stuff, okay? So there's really kind of 3 primary kind of ways that we shape sound. Once we've gotten microphones, I should say a word about microphones. You know, different microphones are useful for different purposes. I have seen churches that have taken the Shure 58 microphone and they're using it for the totally wrong thing. So the Shure 58 microphone, if you're not familiar with it, I probably have one around here. I use them as like bookmarks and stuff. But anyway, a Shure 58 microphone is like a $100 microphone that you see all the time. Like it's everywhere because it is a standard design, it's cheap, and it's effective. The Shure 58 is also tough. It's road proven. It's made by Shure Corporation. You've seen it 1,000 times. It looks kind of like an ice cream cone, you know, with like a ball and a cone. And these things, man, they're tough. Like if you're at a site and you're doing a worship service and you need a hammer, grab a Shure 58 and hammer that nail in, right? Like it's fine. Like those things are tough as nails. Okay. So the Shure 58 microphone is designed though for voice. And so you see them like for singing. And so the optimal distance of a Shure 58 is like 18 to 6 inches. That's what it's designed for, right? It is not designed to pick up a choir that is 15 feet away or 20 feet away, or an organ, right? If you need to pick up an organ or a choir or something like that, you need to look at a different microphone. And you may go to a place like Long and McQuaid and you may look at the wall of microphones and you may be like, I'm not going to spend $500 on a microphone. Guess what? You don't have to. There are lots of great Chinese copies of famous microphone systems. And so you can go to Long and McQuaid and you can say, I need a microphone to pick up a choir at a distance of 15 feet, blah, blah, blah. And they will help you out. You can be like, I want to spend $200. They'll be like, okay, get this Apex, 2100 or whatever it is. And you'll be good to go. Okay. So make sure you're picking the right microphones. But okay, once we've gotten past the microphones and we've gotten them into the soundboard, what do you do with it next? So equalization, dynamics, effects. Okay. Equalization. All right. So equalization, what we're referring to is, if you have a spectrogram of the frequency of sound from like low to high, like bass to high, okay, you've got this range of sound frequency. Well, audio engineers figured out pretty quickly that with pretty basic circuits, they could, bring up or bring down the volume of the different frequencies on a frequency, on a spectrum. Okay, so there's two basic types of EQ that you'll see. One is a graphic EQ that looks kind of like this. These are often referred to by how many bands they have. So you'll hear somebody say, this is a 30-band graphic equalizer, or this is a 15-band graphic equalizer. And what they're talking about is like how many divisions of sound there are here. So you see that this is marked from 25 hertz all the way up to 20,000 hertz. Guess what? Nobody can hear 25 hertz. Okay, that's actually below the level of recognition by human beings. But the reason that that's there partly is because although you cannot hear a 25 hertz audio signal, it will actually create resonance and harmonics with the next kind of octave above it. So, I actually saw this demonstration one time at a big pipe organ in university where the musician played a key and he said, can you hear that? And like none of us could, right? So then he goes an octave higher and he says, do you hear that? And we're like, yes. Now he's like, now you play them together. What do you hear now? And we could actually hear a different sound, right? Because there was now a harmonic that was below human registry, but we could still hear it. So that's why one of the reasons why audio systems will actually support frequencies that are lower or higher than human recognition. But anyway, so we start off at 25 hertz. That's the lowest. Another really important frequency to recognize is 60 hertz. So the 60 hertz hum is like the nightmare. Okay, so 60 hertz hum is, okay, 60 hertz hum is the sound of electronics, right? And if you're hearing a 60 hertz hum, that means that you have interference from an AC electrical source on your system. So that means that maybe you have like an audio cable crossed with a power cable, which is carrying 120 volts AC. It's creating an oscillating electric field. And it's interfering with your microphone signal wire. Now, nice audio cables, XLR cables, are shielded to prevent this from happening. But you can have, badly made cables. You can have unbalanced, unprotected cables. You can have lots of other issues that could potentially be a pathway for interference on that 60 hertz frequency. So if you're hearing that 60 hertz hum, one option is you can take a graphic equalizer like this and you can find that 30 hertz frequency. Oops, sorry. You can find the, come back, behave. You can, let me just go back one here. Okay, there you go. You can find that 60 hertz frequency and you can kill it, okay, with just like a notch filter, just like that one fader, and you can potentially get rid of it. However, you just killed all other 60 hertz frequency sounds. And so potentially you're also like going to make it sound slightly weird when people are talking or whatever. So that's not the perfect solution. The perfect solution is to actually find the source of your interference. So, okay, so how do you find the interference? This is a life lesson that I teach the youngsters. If you have an audio problem and you need to debug it, you start from the source and you work your way to the destination. So you start with like the actual microphone and you eliminate that as the problem by perhaps plugging in a different microphone. If you still have the interference, then you go to like, okay, this microphone has a cable, the cable runs to this, to the let's say the soundboard. So unplug it and then ask, do you still hear the hum? If you do, then it's not an issue with that source. Then you keep following the train until you find the source of your interference. You can, I mean, this is getting into kind of detail, but okay, so one thing that can happen that can create that 60 hertz hum is that you might have differentially grounded equipment where you've got like a soundboard that's on one circuit in your church, and you have another piece of equipment that's on a different one, and they're grounded differently. And because of that difference, they create a 60 hertz in the ground. They can create a hum. So if that happens, then what you need to do is separate the grounds of the two. One trick for that is you can take a microphone cable, an XLR cable, and it's got 3 pins in it, right? One of those pins is the ground. You can pull out that sucker with a pair of pliers, and you've basically created a lifted ground situation where you've got like you've isolated the ground of one piece of electrical equipment from another piece of electrical equipment. Okay, so if you do run the 60 hertz hum, there are solutions. Email me and I can walk you through how to solve those problems. But those are an overview of your basic 60 hertz hum strategy things. Okay, so that's a graphic equalizer. A parametric equalizer is more fancy. This is a screenshot from what it looks like in the ATEM Mini software. I know a lot of you are using that particular piece of equipment. So the basic idea of the parametric equalizer is that it's similar to the graphic equalizer in that, you've got frequencies and you're going to cut those frequencies or amplify those frequencies, right? The difference is where with an EQ, that's a graphic EQ, you just have like each band kind of designated. With a parametric equalizer, what you do is you use a dial or a setting in the software to determine what frequency you want to target, and then whether you want to raise or lower that frequency by how much. And then because you're creating a curve, right, then you have to determine what's called the Q, which is how wide a swath you want to do. So, what you can do is then you stack multiple of these. So you've got like 3 or 4 different things. So you're going to create like a bump around 120 hertz, to bring it up. And then you're going to like create a cut at like 30 hertz. You're going to do a drop off, what's called a high pass filter. So you're going to drop off everything that's low, right? You're going to maybe, amplify things that are around the S kind of frequencies, like, around 1000 hertz. So, you kind of shape the sound with a parametric equalizer. What I just explained is going to sound very, like hard if you have never used a graphic equalizer, but good news, a lot of the graphic equalizers, the digital ones, have presets. So you can actually select a preset like vocal, female voice, or, drum kit, or like a lot of them have actually presets built into them. So parametric equalizers are not so scary. The other thing about parametric equalizer typically is you can get a nice graph like I was showing you. So you can kind of see where it's going to do what it's going to do, and you can listen to it and you can kind of modify it. So we're getting into like more refined stuff, right? With like using a parametric equalizer, but they're really great. Once you learn how to use them, you'll never go back to a graphic equalizer once you get used to using a parametric EQ. Okay, tips and tricks. Generally speaking, try not to push or boost sound on an EQ, like individual frequency levels. What you want to do instead is cut the stuff you want to cut. So you want to kind of cut stuff, not amplify things. So if you're looking at a graphic EQ, most of the faders should be down, like the ones that are have anything, or 0, not up. Okay. The next thing I would say is know your microphones. So, when you buy a microphone, one of the things that will be in the package is a manual, and in the manual there will be a frequency response curve, which will diagram for you how that microphone responds to different frequencies. And it'll generally be fairly flat, and then it might kind of slope up a little bit and then kind of do something like this. And what's telling you is like, okay, this microphone is sensitive to high frequencies, or this one is good at low frequencies, and so forth. Like this microphone I'm talking to you right now is really good at low frequencies. If I get close to it, right? And by the way, that effect is called the proximal effect. And it's what you hear in podcasts and like radio production, and it's like a stylized thing. You don't have to do that. You don't have to lean into your microphones, but this microphone like has that characteristic. Other microphones will be different. Shure 58, Shure 57, pretty flat, right? But other microphones like shotgun microphones, pencil microphones, other kinds of microphones may have like some stuff. So you need to know, like, okay, is this microphone like what's its qualities? So you can start to kind of optimize it a little bit with your equalization. Know your application, and then know your instance. What I mean by that is like, is this going to be recording an organ? Is this going to be recording a piano? Is this going to be recording a spoken voice? And those would all call for slightly different kind of equalization strategies that are slightly beyond the scope of this discussion. But basically, you can look online. You can be like, how do I equalize for spoken word? And you'll see some explanations of how to do that. I mean, it gets to the level where, you know, I mean, I know places where they might have like a wireless microphone set for the pastor, and that'll be a different wireless microphone set. Equalization for that microphone, same microphone, different equalization for like the associate pastor. Why? Because their voices are different. So they have them equalized differently to bring out the qualities of those voices. In my home congregation, St. John's, for example, I can tell you that like Molly needs like a bit more bass than Johann does. Like, you know, so we actually have those channels are EQ'd slightly differently on the soundboard. Okay, so know your microphones, know your application, and then tweak them, like listen to them and like modify them, make small refinements to get like superior sound. Okay, proper gain structure. So gain structure refers to the level of audio signal that you have at all stages of the signal path. The signal path is like, you know, voice box, okay, to like, you know, to people's ears. That's the sound path. So all on those stages, you have different audio signal levels. Okay, so, you know, the microphone comes into the soundboard. You need to have that first level, that first gain level set appropriately. Your audio board, whatever audio board you're using, whether it's a Mackie, and Allen and Heath, whatever, will have instructions on how to calibrate microphones with the correct gain. A correctly trimmed audio board would have all the faders at the beginning of a production, at the beginning of a worship service. All the faders would be across evenly, and they would all be at unity or zero. They'd all be at a base setting. And the different volume levels would have already been set by the gain levers at the knobs at the top. Okay, so you set the gain first for the board, and then you start messing with the individual levels like during the worship service or whatever. The faders are meant to be used like during the service, but the basic configuration is supposed to be set prior to that based on the sensitivity of the different microphones and their use. So that's what those trim knobs are for. Okay, so you want to get that right, that basic gain right, and then you can do that. And the reason that's it gets into a technical discussion of why it's important to have that gain right, but just trust me, you want that gain like set correctly, you know, at all stages. You want it basically, you know, you never want to peak. Like if you're peaking, if those little red lights that are on the soundboard go on, you've got a problem. You need to fix it. Like, do not peak your audio because you're getting distortion. So yeah. So watch your gain levels. Okay, proper gain structure. All right. So let's now talk about dynamics. I'm not sure how much time I have to get into this, but basically what we're talking about with dynamics is managing the volume level of the signal. Okay. So a really simple example is what's called a gate. And this diagram is a little wordy, but okay, along the bottom scale is, you know, what is the input level, right, of the signal? You know, is it -70, -60, -50 dB, you know, on across the scale? And then across the vertical scale here is what is the resulting output signal level from that audio source. So what we're saying here is that if a signal, if you have a gate, in this case, they set a gate threshold here at -70 dB. That means that any signal less than -70 dB will have an output of 0, right? 0. So why is that good? That means that like when your microphone is just sitting there on the podium, nobody's talking into it. If you look at the audio meter on your whatever software, whatever you're using, if you see it like less than 70, this gate is going to cut it to 0. So you don't get that kind of background noise, that hiss of the room, electrical noise on the signal line, like anything, like it's just 0. So a gate is a way to clean up your audio so you don't get that kind of bass level sound. Okay, cool. All right, the limiter is on the opposite end of that spectrum. It makes sure that your audio doesn't peak above a certain level. So in this example they're giving, they set the gate at what? They set it at positive 15 dB. Okay, so what they're saying here is that like any signal over 15 decibels is only going to be returned at 15 decibels. If the signal is 20 decibels above, it's going to be cut back down. So you're not going to get like a peak that's going to break your amplifiers or your speakers or like make people run shrieking if they're listening at home. Okay, so that's what a limiter is. It limits the maximum volume. Okay, so then between those, you have something called an expander. The expander idea is that you take a signal. Sorry, let me just. Okay, the expander idea is that you take a signal and like the difference between a low signal and a high signal, you're actually kind of like expanding that so that like a soft signal actually like to a loud signal, like that difference will actually be higher. Compression does the opposite. So when you compress the audio dynamics, you're saying that like you're going to take the kind of medium level sound and the highest level volume sound, and you're going to bring them closer together. So it makes the volume sound more consistent. Okay. So here's the thing that's kind of interesting. 90% of the audio that you hear, including on this Zoom call, is compressed. It's compressed by the software in Zoom, but everything else you hear on TV is like highly compressed audio. So we in Churchland, because we're not using like a lot of fancy software, we don't necessarily set the compression, but you should. So this is a refinement you can do. You can have an outboard compression or dynamics processor if you're doing analog, but most of you don't have that. So in digital land, on an ATEM Mini Pro, in the audio settings, you have that setting. So I can even show you, what it looks like. It is this box right here. This is the a screenshot of what the ATEM Mini's audio compression dynamics screen looks like that you can get to by plugging in a laptop into your ATEM. So you can set the threshold for compression, the expander, the gate, all that. If you want more information about how to do that, either email me or look it up online. There's lots of great stuff. ATEM, the Black Magic, who makes the ATEM, they have like various tutorials on how to set your compression, how to set your gates, stuff like that. So that's what I'm talking about when I talk about dynamics.
Sorry, Tate,
Yes.
not to interrupt, but
Yeah.
time is getting short, so we have about 8 or 9 minutes left.
I thought we were going to 8:30.
Well, we want to have questions and discussion too.
Okay. All right. Well, okay.
So-
All right. I'll we're not that far from the end. but
Okay,
Okay. So effects.
just a
Okay.
heads up.
All right. So effects are what you use to kind of color the sound. Now, effects are an additive process. You're kind of adding stuff to your audio generally. So there's a couple of common effects: reverb, delay, panning, echo, filters. So an example of reverb, like in a church, we're used to reverb because somebody sings and that sound gets reflected off of all the flat surfaces, especially in the church, and we get these returns of the audio for all these different locations, and it kind of mixes and it sounds nice, right? The problem is if you have that same singer and you put a microphone on them, the quality of reverb is going to be much reduced. You're going to get the proximal effect like this, and you're going to get much less of the reverb effect of it being mixed by the room. So the solution for that is to add a little bit of reverb in your processing. Again, you can do that. Most of us would do that nowadays digitally, using either OBS or the ATEM Mini software or something similar. Okay. So reverb is like critical. Reverb makes people feel like they're in a room and not rather than like that they have their like ear up to the singer, right? Like that's the difference. Okay. Delay is not super useful for most of what we're doing. The delay you'd probably use in our scenarios and live streaming more as a problem solver if your audio and video are out of sync. And there's a couple of ways that they might get out of sync, which I'm not going to get into, but if they're out of sync, you can use delay to bring them back into alignment. And a rule of thumb, by the way, is that there's about, for every foot that sound has to travel, it takes a millisecond. So, if you have a microphone at the back of the church and a video camera, and it's 100 feet, then there's going to be a 100 millisecond delay between the spoken word at the front and when it actually gets back to that microphone at the back of the church. So you'd have to theoretically put in a 100 millisecond delay, or you're going to have the audio and video appear out of sync. Right now, if you have your microphone up next to the pastor and you've got the camera in the back of the church, you don't have that problem because that sound signal is going to travel the speed of light through your audio cables. But you see the point. So delay is useful. Echo, you're not going to use that a lot, probably. Panning, you might use panning if you're doing a stereo mix. Then you might want to say that the piano is going to you're going to pan it over to the left side of the mix so that it sounds like it's from the left side of the event. Filters, you're unlikely to use that, but they do exist as effects. Okay, so those are kind of advanced refinement. So EQ, then you start worrying about dynamics, then you start worrying about effects. Okay, last thing I'm going to talk about is workable workflows. So these are some kind of more process oriented kind of considerations for how you're doing live streaming as it relates to audio. First of all, do an audit, right? What do I mean? Like make a list, like what is the equipment that you have? Who are the people that are involved and what are the processes that you use? So equipment, people, processes. Processes, like who shows up first? Who unlocks the audio cabinet? Who plugs in the cameras? That's process. People are, is there a designated digital verger? Is somebody in charge here, right? If not, I mean, you could have a situation where there's not a, somebody in charge. Okay. So then, how do you do it? Okay. Design for redundancy. So, when something goes bad, what is your backup? Now you may not think that's necessary for every worship service, but if you're doing like Easter morning, you're going to want a backup. Like, what is that backup? It could be a cell phone. Like you could be like, okay, if everything else goes to pot, I've got my, iPhone and I'm just going to like live stream from this. Okay. That's workable. Okay. So, have a backup. Okay. Same thing for people. Like if you just have one person at your church who knows how to run everything, that's great until that person gets COVID, right? Or they get sick or whatever, right? So have backups. Same thing for processes. Like, if this doesn't work, what's our backup for that? All right, bless this mess. Tips. Okay. I have like 3 tips here, and then we're basically done. Okay. So tip number 1, make a map. What do I mean when I say a map? Oop, did I not? Okay. Oh, all right. I'll just show you. Okay. So this was a map. A diagram that I made for St. Mary Magdalene's to a proposal for improving their live streaming here. And I made this using a online service called Lucidchart, and they have free accounts. So you could make this chart yourself without spending any money. And what it does is it explains very clearly how these different pieces plug into each other. I didn't go into the level of detail of like explaining what kind of cable these are or anything like that. But for like most people, that would be quite a useful little diagram to explain, oh, okay, the camera goes into the ATEM, the soundboard goes into the ATEM, this monitor plugs into the ATEM. So make a map. But a map is not sufficient. Like you can't just hand over a map to somebody and they're going to like know how to use your system. So make a recipe. The recipe is a checklist, right? It's like, these are the ingredients. Like, is this camera set up? Is this camera set up? Is this piece of equipment on, and so forth. So just a checklist, right? Do this, do this, do this. It should have the passwords. It should have, anything else that somebody needs to know. So a well-made recipe should be workable by somebody who basically knows nothing about your system, who can just come in and just follow the directions and turn it on. Okay. The next, and one of my last kind of critical tips here is integrate with other ministries. What you're doing is just as important as what the Chancel Guild does, as what the greeters do, all the rest of it. So it should be recognized as such. And if it is not, then like, knock your pastor upside the head, right? Like be like, what's wrong with you? Yeah, okay. This needs to be like a ministry, right? So it should be blessed. Like if there's like a blessing of ministries that happens, let's say that you do spend a lot of money on a new, live streaming setup. That should maybe be consecrated, right? Like you should have a little service in which they sprinkle, maybe not holy water, maybe they just like made the sign of the cross on it, but you sort of like bless the equipment, right? But bless the people, commission them as like virtual, pastors or virtual vergers to do that work. Okay. So bless the equipment, bless the people, like recognize it as a ministry and make sure it gets represented at the table. I mean, I remember at one of our big churches not long ago, there was this was actually 2 years ago, I guess it was, actually, time flies. It was the Easter service, and the live stream wasn't up and running right at the service start time. So what happened was the people in the room, even though there were only like 50 people in the room or less, decided to go ahead and start the worship service like they would normally. And the live stream wasn't ready yet. So by the time that the people running the live stream got it going, the service was already into, like, they'd already completed the Exultet and like other stuff worship wise, and then we're kind of joining live in progress. And there were like this is during COVID, there were like 5 or 6 as many times people on the live stream as there were in person. I'm like, shouldn't that have been the priority? Like making sure all those people see it from the beginning. So what's the solution? Well, maybe the people at the back of the room at the soundboard should have said, hold on, we need another 5 minutes. Don't start yet, right? I've heard of some churches that have like a card they hold up, like a red card or a green card for the back to signal to the people at the front, like, okay, we're live, we're ready to go, something like that. So it should be integrated into those processes. Okay, it is 7:53. We've got another like 37 minutes to talk. I've pretty much gone through my sort of very kind of like fast fire hose of a presentation, but I'm hoping that it caught you wherever you're at in that progression of developing your sound quality, and it's kind of suggested the next step for you, whatever that is. Okay, so I'm happy to take questions and like thoughts.
So thank you very much, Tay. So please use your little, just raise your hand, or you can with the Zoom with the show captions or reaction.
All right, I see Bruce, I think, was maybe first.
Yeah.
Yep.
Off mute. I'm off mute. Okay. I'm hearing an echo.
Yeah, Bruce, I think you must have like more than one version of the Zoom meeting going in the same room, maybe?
Well, I don't think so, but it's possible. Go on to the next person.
Yeah, I mean,
Thanks, Bruce.
yeah, Bruce, just so that for your troubleshooting, I see that you've got two instances of yourself on the Zoom meeting. There's Bruce Corbett, Emmanuel Video, and there's like Bruce C.
How can you ditch Bruce C?
I can do that. I'll do that.
Thank you.
Go ahead with John, I think, while I do this.
Yeah,
maybe.
go ahead, John.
Unmute, John.
You got to unmute yourself, John.
There, I think it's done. At what point, if we're building in, do we need both backup or even redundancy? For instance, a service provider, I can't afford to do Rogers and Bell, but there's other places. Where is it good to have that? I mean, so yes, there's more than one camera. You can't have more than one soundboard per se. But
Yeah.
for instance, if it going out, is looking at where we've got Wi-Fi. I got spare equipment, say, well, maybe I should have a dedicated Wi-Fi that's really secure for the team so that I don't have any competition on that connection. Things like that. Where are strategic spots to jump on that?
Yeah. Okay. Well, where in your experience has your stuff broken?
When someone decided to put an extra router in and stuff like that. And
Okay. Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, so generally speaking, I am a big fan of using a hardwire Ethernet connection rather than
Yeah.
Wi-Fi, if at all possible.
Fair enough.
So that's like a thing. Okay, so once you've got that, or even if you're just on Wi-Fi, yeah, I mean, having your own kind of Wi-Fi router is not a bad idea, but you can configure routers so that they prioritize certain kinds of traffic. Again, it's a little bit beyond the scope of this discussion how to do that, but you can actually configure a router so that it prioritizes the live stream over like other things. But I would say that actually I found that to be less important than my overall quality of the connection that I had for internet just generally into the building. And
Mhm.
so I used to have problems with Rogers,
Yeah.
and I brought Rogers in multiple times to try to fix it. And what the text told me is that the problem was outside on the physical pole outside the building, and that there was water getting into the box, the junction box. And the problem is that they, as contractors, are brought in to fix the problem. So they would just do the most inexpensive patch to make it work again. And what the text told me is what really needed to happen is they needed to replace the whole box. But Rogers wasn't going to do that until enough people complained from the same like node, right? That they said, oh, this box is really a problem, and replace the whole thing. So after I learned that, I said, forget this, especially since we were running a point of sale system in the church too for a social enterprise we were doing. We needed 100% reliable internet. So I said, what can I do about that? Rogers Fiber. I'm sorry, Bell Fiber. So Bell Fiber Optic right into the building, and it was rock solid, never had it drop, never had a problem. Okay. So I would say that was actually a bigger factor than like this or that router or like prioritizing this or that internet traffic.
Agree. I mean, you see, you have that single point, but I was wondering if there's certain places to build that in. It's like, but you want backups for everything, including the people.
Yeah. So one idea here is you can do too is like, especially if it's a high priority service, like a funeral, a wedding,
Oh my goodness.
Easter, what you can do is you can make sure that you're recording on those different cameras that you've got. So the cameras themselves will have like, you can put a chip in, you can put a card in and record. So you have an isolated recording. So if everything else goes haywire, at least you have that camera. Depending on which version of the ATEM you have, some of them have the capability of recording onto the ATEM. And another thing you could do is if you're using OBS, you can record on OBS. So even if your internet goes down, you can record the service, record to tape, right? And then put it online afterwards. Other sources of redundancy, you said, your soundboard, you can't control that, true. But if your soundboard goes down, you could at least have the backup of the microphones in the actual cameras. And
Yeah.
again, it wouldn't be as good as what you get with like the audio from a soundboard with like, wireless mics, but you still have something. So then it becomes incumbent on you as the operator to know what to do in that situation, that if it goes down, how do I incorporate now the sound from the cameras?
So do I need to physically take the camera to the front of the church? We're in a balcony at the back.
Not necessarily. Yeah, I mean, the sound won't be as good. I mean, but presumably this is something that would happen at the last minute anyway. So you're going to be like, oh no, what do I do? And you're just going to make the best of it. Yeah. Some
But
ATEMs
you-
allow for cell phone to be used for internet as well. Not sure what you mean, Mark. Yeah, I don't know about the ATEM. Oh, I see what you mean. Oh, yeah. To connect to Wi-Fi. Yeah, you could do that. Yeah, and I've done that. I have live stream services off of my cell phone as a hotspot. I've done that multiple times. Definitely works. And you're at the mercy of Bell or Rogers or whoever your service provider is, but it is an option. And like especially if you're outside, it works great. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Bruce, I see you're back with us.
Unmute, Bruce. You're muted.
I'm off now, so I'm not echoing. How many people in this thing are actually do the video? Could I just physical hands? How many of us are there here? So to me, I looked at this a lot easier than you do. I didn't get to a certain place. I had to go through, an Allen and Heath board and all of that stuff. But I use the issues that we face. Yes, they're all issues of microphones and everything like that, but it's the tricks. How do you do stuff? And actually, I look at it. The question I have for the diocese is, you have to realize that the priest, the minister, is the director, the actor, all things. And that the hardest part is having people aware of what they have to do and how is it different doing a streaming service from a traditional service. How do you script, you have to look at it and say, the goal of our streaming is not just to do, at least in my mind, and maybe is not just to mimic what's happening in the service, but to draw people out. Now, maybe that has to be done through editing out or having cuts that that you can use. But we've gotten through a lot. I guess the one thing I'd look for from the diocese would be to have connections to people who are doing the day-to-day stuff, who know what we're dealing with. If we have a problem, who do we go to? Tay, I could imagine I could have used you when I was trying to figure out an Allen and Heath board that is 50 years old. I don't need a digital board. The analog board is perfectly excellent. The problem is knowing how to interface to it is like a whole different world. And it took me a year and a bit to figure it out.
Yeah,
So-
I hear you. So one of the things I heard in that was like, do the clergy know how to work with the live stream happening? And I think that it's incumbent on all of you to sort of speak up about that. So for example, at St. John's, Norway, the baptism on Easter, the pastor stood right in front of the camera. And like, so we saw the back and we couldn't see the actual baptism. And I was like, and like, it wasn't the kind of thing where we could like go up and like say something during the service. And I could see it happening. I wasn't running the audio or the video at that time, but I was like in the pew and I could see it happening. And I was like, so what do? You have to like speak up and you have to say an email, by the way, like put it gently, but just so it's important to be aware of the point of view of the people that are visiting, and that this camera is the eyes of the remote congregation, and that kind of thing. You asked about are there strategies to sort of create more immersive experiences? Yes. For example, if you're using OBS, there is a plugin for OBS, which in combination with your phone can make this a video source. So you can have somebody during the baptism go up with one of these, and it could actually go to OBS over Wi-Fi and like out to the world. Like a lot of people don't even know that capability exists, but
I've kind of got that. It's
Yeah.
what I'm looking for to the diocese. Elizabeth, I'm looking at you, is the idea of doing workshops for the priests, the do's and don'ts, the how can I helps, that type of thing, because I understand what you're saying, and after the service, I'll say, what's happening? Are you having readers? Are you having multiple readers? Who's doing, what are you trying to do in this service? And trying to get direction that way, because that's the whole thing. But I want to hear from some of the other people who are doing services here. I use what's a product called that you may not even heard of. It's easy. It's called a YOLO box or a YOLO Live or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's an excellent product. It makes things simple and gets the job done. And our job is just get it as, visually clean. I think the audio absolutely is important. I think that there's some direction. What I want is a hotline to say, if I've got a problem and saying, how do I fix this? I want to be able to speak to someone who will actually understand the question.
Mhm.
And because I don't know who to turn to in the diocese. I basically had to teach myself.
Yeah.
And-
So Elizabeth can speak to, like, there is like a bit of a group of people in the diocese that she could refer you to, but there are a lot of online groups. There's several Facebook groups, and there's some Discord groups that talk about things like live streaming for churches.
Is this for the Diocese of Toronto?
No, but these aren't diocesan specific problems, right? These are
I disagree. I think that
okay. But
I
I
think-
think
think
a lot
it's-
of these problems that you're talking about are the kind of problems that are common across like Anglican, but even just more generally churches.
absolutely, I agree with you on that. But what I'm saying is that when you're totally boxed in, you want to be able to turn to maybe one of the people. Looking at Mark Webster. Mark probably could answer my question, because I'll tell him what I'm doing. He'll say, I can do that, or talk to this person. It's
Yeah,
the word of mouth.
Bruce, we're going to talk at the end. This was a pilot project tonight. At the end, we're going to determine how do we establish a network to exactly what you're talking about.
which
How
I
do we
thought
go
this was-
forward?
Yeah.
So at the end, there'll be a questionnaire to fill out. And you raise a great point that, there's a lot of knowledge in this room that we can turn to each other and solve our own little problems. So let's go to Greg. You had your hand up, sir. And then Peter.
I think that Peter had his hand up first, so
Oh,
I
I'm
will
sorry.
defer to Peter. If
Thank
come
you.
back to me.
So Peter, could you unmute?
Oh, you want me to start? Okay.
Yes.
Firstly, I wanted to say that we don't really have any problem, because we take checking the system out very seriously. And we check the system out on a Saturday afternoon, which I do because I'm the technical person around, and make sure everything's working properly. And then I would think it was disaster to start live streaming 1 minute before the service starts. We live stream 15 minutes before the service starts, which we fill with doing announcements and that sort of thing, telling people what's going on. So generally we haven't had any problems because we check the system out on a Saturday. Thirdly, we have a permanent installation which consists of 2 cameras, which means that if the minister stands in front of one camera, we can always switch to the second camera. We have two audio mixers because the channels 5 to 8 are instrumentation and all our channel requirements are for microphones. So we use one audio mixer as a preamp that feeds into a single channel of the second audio mixer.
Mhm.
And this means that if one of the audio mixers goes on the blip, we can always quickly plug in the microphones into the one mixer. So that I did find that the adjustments to all the audio was a little bit esoteric for me, partly because the volunteers don't necessarily have the ear to be able to adjust everything on the fly. And as you know, we want volunteers that we have to have volunteers that can easily use the system. So we actually don't have a preset. All our microphones are preset, and we set them up and adjust them, and we check the audio every so often and go from there.
Well, I would think most of those dynamics and equalization and stuff would mostly be preset, like that stuff. It's the levels that you'd probably want to change on the fly.
Yeah, that's what we're
Yeah,
adjusting.
yeah.
But what we have found is that we originally were Zooming and the audio is awful. We were then live streaming to YouTube, which was relatively okay. But then we invested in the Vimeo live streaming platform, and the video and the audio quality is absolutely amazing. And everybody thinks it's due to me. So they're actually very happy. So that's what we have. So we have a pretty expensive system. We have a permanent system, and we can don't have to make changes. See, the biggest problem with systems is that once you start playing around with them and moving cables or putting hardware in and taking hardware out, that's when the problems occur. If you can leave the system static, then you're well off to the races. And in sort of 18 months, we've not had a single problem other than with cables that we were plugging and unplugging, and that's the only issue that we've had. So anyway, so that's my comments on it.
Thank you, Peter. Now let's go to Greg.
Thank you. I'm at St. John's East Orangeville, and I have been video recording our services and editing those since 2016. At this point, I'm using 2 separate cameras. I'm making a separate, I think, high quality audio recording. So when I get home, I am editing the audio to equalize volume levels across I have used separate microphones as well, but I'm using one stereo mic at this point. I'm then synchronizing the 2 camera tracks with each other. And then I am synchronizing the audio track into that. And then I go in and I add my titles and all of that other stuff. And each service takes me approximately 6 hours for the balance of Sunday, and so that it's uploaded fairly close to the service itself. What we need to do, first of all, that's all my personal equipment. So the church needs to purchase its equipment to replace. I'm prepared to continue doing what I'm doing for a while until a decision is made about whether to move to live streaming. What I want to ensure, I need advice about whether the equipment that we are seeking is going to be consistent with what will be needed for live streaming if we move in that direction. And when I look online, there is such a confusing amount of advice about what basic equipment's needed to do a good live streaming job. So I don't expect to have that answered on this Zoom, because I think that I'm needing some basic information that a lot of people here have moved past.
Not
Yeah,
at all.
it's also, it depends a lot on your particular circumstance and your particular church, the layout, like all kinds of issues. So it's not a cookie cutter answer to it. The next thing is like, there's a vast, like, there's a curve of like how much money you spend versus the quality of production you get. So the difference between a camera that costs a couple $100 and a camera that costs a couple $1,000 is substantial, but maybe not be worth it for you, right? Like,
Right.
so, because like when you get up into higher level cameras, what you get is a lot more options. So like the camera that you're seeing me through right now is way overkill for something like this, but it's the camera that I've got, and so I just plugged it in, and that's what I use for Zoom meetings. But the thing about this camera is I would never recommend it for most churches because it's completely manual. So it requires like knowing what setting your ISO, setting your f-stop, setting your this, setting your that.
Right.
And I've got it even on manual focus right now. Like, so, do you really want to foist that on volunteers that they've got to like do all that manual configuration? No, of course not. So you've got to sort of like balance, like, what is the right price point? What is the right kind of level of features that you need? And so that's going to be very contextual, right? Like it's going to depend on your situation.
I don't know, Tay, if
yeah.
you're a person I should contact for that advice, or if there's someone or this other group in the diocese, because I need to get this moving along.
Yeah, we could talk about it. I mean, you can send me an email and we can talk about it. And usually what I do is I give options. So, when I consult with churches, I usually give like ABC, like this is the minimum that I can sort of imagine that would improve what you've got. This is the maximum. If you want to spend $50,000, this is how you do it, right? But if you want to spend less than 1,000, this is how you do it, right? So you give options, and then and people can make an informed choice, right? Whether they want to
I appreciate that. I'll probably email you, and
Other.
I would be very welcoming of that advice to get us moving forward.
Sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
And Greg, there's also a map of all the churches that are in this program that's going to be available. You could talk to your neighbors as well, or just check out a couple of streams and see one that you like, and just call them and just have a chat
Yes, okay, thanks.
and get some information that way.
Very
I'd be
good.
happy to talk to you as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, it's important to recognize, Greg, that there's lots of ways to solve these problems. So, don't think that like if you make the wrong choice, everything's going to burst into flames and you'll be condemned to the fires of hell forever. Like, it's not like that. It's going to be, you recommend a camera, they buy it, it turns out not to be what they needed, and then they like sell it or get rid of it and they buy a new one, right? Like but I see your point that you want them to be set up for success, right? So yeah, we can help you out.
Thank you.
I think it's probably Dan next, I think.
Okay, we have, I guess, 3 different microphones at our church, and the sound's really not a big problem. We have the Shure microphone on the lectern, which works really well because we got people very close to it, and it's corded. And then we have an omnidirectional microphone in front of the choir and the organ and a piano in that, all in that one corner there.
Right.
And it's hanging from the roof of the building down, I don't know, probably about 15 feet.
Yeah, it's probably a pendulum mic. Yeah.
And maybe about the same distance away. We have 2 large speakers there that the organ's connected to. So it works pretty well with that too. We had to move it back a little bit to get a better sound. It was a little too close to begin with, but like anything, play around with it and you get the right answer eventually. But our problem seems to be with the lav mic on our priest. She had like a headset mic that kind of comes around in front,
Right.
and it was kind of wobbling around all the time, and it didn't work too well. So we went with a lav mic that connects on or just pins on her garment, and she speaks pretty softly. So we've got the volume turned up on the mixer pretty much as far as it go without getting any background noise or any interference on it.
Mhm.
But I don't know if anybody else has had that kind of issue. it's just something, if she's talking straight ahead, it's not too bad. If she tilts her head down a little bit toward the microphone, it's great, but that never happens, so. I don't know what better microphone there is for that kind of situation.
So do you know what the brand of wireless microphone it is?
Joe, you're there. I'm not sure. You got it along in McQuaid, I think.
Depending on the brand and stuff,
don't
often
remember, sorry.
you can swap out the actual microphone. And so one thing to check would be, are you using the right microphone, like for this application? And, you know, like, for example, you can get lavalier mics that are basically an omni pickup, or ones that are cardioid pickup, or like different pickup patterns. So that would be like one thing, like, are you using the right microphone? The second thing to look at would be like, you know, looking at the differentials of like, okay, is this particular microphone like particularly good at sensitivity or whatever? A third thing to check would be like the higher end, like mid to high end wireless microphone lavalier sets will have like multiple places where you set that gain. Remember the gain structure? So one thing to check is like, is the transmitter, like what's its sensitivity level set at? Right. So if it's
Right.
like a Shure, oh God, what is that? Not Shure, a Sennheiser. I'm forgetting the model names. It's late, but anyway, the certain like the mid-level to high-level Shure, sorry, not Shure, the Sennheiser systems, they have like you set like the level of sensitivity at the body pack level, and then it comes to the so that would be another thing to check is like, do you have that set appropriately? So yeah, but what's the downside of having too sensitive a lavalier mic for like a low speaking person is like going to be like noise from like rubbing against the fabric, stuff like that. Like if you went into that, I would say use a high pass filter. So, you know, which is going to basically cut the low frequencies and it'll help with some of that noise, but it's just part of the problem with like lavalier mics versus like the headset mics. Headset mics can be improved. You can like the really nice ones, they actually use a wire that is bendable, right? And you can like not just like here, but I mean like around your head too. So they can actually like in like theater productions and stuff like that, they will actually custom make just by bending wire to make it fit your head appropriately so it doesn't shift around and stuff.
Yeah.
So and again, you can probably swap it out. So if the one that came with the system was crappy and not adjustable, you can probably get an aftermarket one that is adjustable.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Can I ask a video question, or are we going to wait
Sure.
a bit for that?
Go ahead.
Okay. This isn't even anything to do with live streaming, but we're considering putting screens in the church.
Yeah.
To help people follow along, and for people that need something to look at that's bigger font and hopefully maybe reduce our carbon footprint a little bit by not printing as many bulletins.
Yeah.
But we have had 3 people in for quotes on drop down screens and a projector, and it's coming back pretty expensive, like $20,000 to $30,000 for 2 of them.
I don't know, dude. Like I'm not a big fan of the screens anymore. Like
Right.
the drop down screens and projectors, because the
Right.
cost of the flat screens has gotten so relatively low, and they
Right.
have much higher brightness, so you don't have to worry about people being able to read it when it's a daytime service. So I can't quote you off the top of my head like what an 84-inch screen costs now, but it's like not that expensive, like relatively.
They get up a bit more at 75 are pretty reasonable right now, but once you
Yeah.
get above that.
Yeah. So those are nice. And like when we did the screens at Redeemer, they were shocked at the price. Like it was much lower than they expected.
Yeah.
And they got like 2 big, like 84-inch ones, and they put them on rolling stands so that they could also for worship services that didn't need them, they just roll them away, and store them, and then they roll them in, and they're high enough that people can see them if they're sitting down. So those kinds of solutions definitely exist.
You can get a rolling stand made for that kind of application, or
Not even made for you, just
They're-
order it
they're
off of
available.
Amazon. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, they make them. The next thing though is, you do want to be a little bit careful about security with those big 84-inch
Yeah.
screens.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
They can roll out the door pretty
they
easily.
can roll out the door pretty easy. Yeah. So you can chain them, you can get it, like literally get a chain and like chain it to something, or you can like just roll it into a locked closet,
I'm concerned about brightness. Our church is fairly bright. We've got
Oh,
windows.
they're pretty bright, like the ones that I've seen used.
Yeah.
I've also seen like the old-fashioned strategy was to have like one big expensive projector at the front of the church, right? But a better approach often is to have more smaller screens spaced out different places,
All right.
because then you don't have to worry about people being blocked, you know? Like one of the best applications I saw in kind of the early days of this was like 20 years ago, a church in England where they had them on pivoting arms that would hide them behind the columns in the church in the nave. So if they wanted this beautiful old church to look beautiful and old, they would just swing them out of the way and you couldn't see them, right? When you're looking down the nave. And then if the worship service required them, you just swing them into place, piece of cake. So there's like creative solutions you can find.
Okay, as long as they're readable and in bright light, I guess we can
Oh
go
yeah,
that
yeah.
way.
It's
A screen
critical.
is going to be much better for that than like a TV monitor is going to be much better for that than a projector screen.
All right, good, thank you.
Cynthia,
Tay, there are 2 quick questions on chat I want to raise, but before that, I just want to respond to Bruce's issue because we've heard it before as the session has unfolded. There are needs that people are speaking about that they wish the diocese would help them with. And I want to assure you that we're listening to those as the program has unfolded. We have been given the opportunity to make recommendations at the end of the program, and we will do that actually publicly with you on June 6th. So if you have any specific issues or ways and means in which the diocese can help you, or how other parishes or other regions can help you, we're really open to hearing that. And so if you could either let myself know or Elizabeth know, because we know that has been an issue. And so I wanted just to make sure that I did hear that. So Tay, a question about the that Jeff raised. What's the interactivity involved in Vimeo? That's the first question. Then the other is, any thoughts about chatting during the service? And so then what do you use? Is it YouTube versus Facebook? I don't know, just any general thoughts on that one.
General thoughts. Okay, the sign has their EWD series have no gain at the belt back. Okay, good to know, Mark. Yeah, different models, have that ability or don't. Okay, so chat. Yeah, I believe Vimeo has chat. I haven't actually used Vimeo a lot. I've normally just used Vimeo for like pre-recorded stuff that I've posted. Most of the live streaming experience that I've had has been actually with YouTube generally, but you're right. No doubt Vimeo is superior if you can get people past the licensing fee. It's definitely superior. The other thing about Vimeo is nice is that it doesn't have the same kind of automatic copyright baloney that YouTube has. So I can't tell you how many copyright disputes I have filed with YouTube, and I've won them all, but because I had the licenses, but they didn't believe me initially, right? Anyway, that's another story. The point is, yeah, definitely interactivity. I like it. I don't think it's for everybody, but the thing is about the chat is that if you're watching a video live stream on YouTube or Vimeo, you don't have to participate in the chat. Like if it's something that you just ignore it, right? And it goes away, you just ignore it. I think the best practice would be to at least like greet people and and try to be like a little interactive, and be like, does anyone have any prayer requests? Like that kind of stuff for sure. I think the expectation if you're doing something like Zoom is going to be higher for participation. So, you need to kind of take that into account, but it's very contextual again to the kind of the congregation and what people are kind of trained to expect from, the thing. One thing that I have not seen from an Anglican church yet, but I would love to see is the phenomenon of having a kind of commentator that was a presence in the stream that was not part of the worship group. So you've got the people up at the chancel. Let's say communion is happening. Wouldn't it be awesome if somebody just with audio came on and said, we want to thank everyone for joining us today while communion is happening. I'd like to lead all you virtual members in prayer, and then read the prayer for virtual communion, pray it with them instead of just having it on the screen. Something like that. And that would be a piece of cake to do. And the person at the back of the church at the sound console could totally do that just by hooking up a microphone and sending it just to that mixed channel for the live stream. But I haven't seen anybody do that yet, but they should.
okay, thank you. And was it Peter that was next?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. First, let me say a critical advantage of Vimeo is the fact you can have recurring events, which means it's one less headache to worry about. You don't.
Yeah.
You can just start the live streaming and away you go. But I really raised the hand because I wanted to talk about TV screens. We incorporated as our installation 5 TV screens in an effort to go paperless. not only that, we then redesigned the system a little bit to capture this TV order of service, you might say, and we incorporate that into the live streaming. So we have what we call layouts of our live streaming, so we actually can show both camera feeds and also a USB video input to our video encoder that allows us to display the order of service or the TV screen information into the live stream. And this is also the fact that we can display, we can show videos on our computer and feed the video feeds and the audio into the live streaming as well. So we've tried to cover every option. The final thing that we couldn't do was to do with the chat, or even though Vimeo has chat, is that it's not really very successful. So we put a screen up to say, please switch to Zoom after the service so you can have your little coffee chat. So everybody, so we don't worry about waiting rooms and that sort of thing. People go onto the Zoom and then they chat.
Yeah, to Peter's point, picking up, like if you're going to do video screens, picking up that as a source that is available for your live stream is low hanging fruit. It's very easily done. There are multiple techniques to do it. And you can do that in OBS. You can do that with an ATEM Mini. You can do that, with kind of most of the things you might be using. It's not hard at all. So definitely do what he just suggested. Yeah. As for layouts, also, yeah, the ATEM Mini supports the picture-in-picture. Is probably the best way to do that with the ATEM. But OBS, yeah, OBS, you have even more flexibility to create different what they call an OBS scenes, and the other sort of video editing software. Live stream. What do you call that? Video production, virtual studio kinds of software will be able to support that functionality as well. So yeah, definitely do that.
Don't say that, Tay. I was rather proud of myself.
No, it's great. It's fantastic that you did that. Yeah. But what's really awesome is like I only know one church that does this is North Bromley United Church. They use NDI. Does anyone know what NDI is? Okay, they've got every camera in their church is wired to the internet. So it basically takes that video signal and puts it onto the LAN, the local area network. And then they can pick it up anywhere in the building and display it in any combination with any other cameras. So they can have so they have separate video mixes in different parts of the building. So what people see if they're in the waiting room, with the kids who are screaming, the crying room, is different from what goes out to the live stream to the regular, world. And they have the versatility that they can pick up that audio, that video anywhere and do anything with it. They can use it as security monitors so that the secretary can see what's going on in the sanctuary, like whatever they want to do. They went the next level too, and they did the same thing with audio using a system called Dante. So with Dante, you take your microphones and you put them on the internet, and then you pick them up and you basically create virtual mixers, and you can mix it like anywhere else you want it. And it would be a significant investment, but they did it. The only church I know that did it. And I have to say that church, I saw a service that they did where just the audio mixing was spectacular. And I said to the guy that did the audio mix, I said, that's like the best church mixing I've heard. He said, thank you. He said, we've been doing those, I've been doing like a mix a day. It's like all during the pandemic. So just practice, just sheer practice. He got really good at it. All right, I think Bruce had his hand up again.
Yeah, and that's our last question for tonight. Over to you, Bruce.
Okay.
Oh, hold on. Denise has a question in chat. Let's do
sorry.
Denise's
Okay.
first and then Bruce. if
Okay,
that's all right.
sorry.
Denise,
Sorry,
church
Denise,
name-
I didn't see that.
Sorry, Denise, that is North Bromley United Church. In North Bromley United Church, they invested heavily in tech right at the beginning of the pandemic. And they've got like a studio facility, and they did a lot of experiments with like different kinds of like video production techniques and kind of different types of services and stuff. So they're really kind of a thought leader in like what you can do. The only problem is that they're well resourced. So you're seeing the solutions that happen when you've got, full-time staff just devoted to doing video production, right? And so yeah. All right, Bruce, you're on.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep.
I heard some good points that I'd like to hear more about. One of the things I noticed that I think people want to see the service. If you have screens, like we have a drop-down screen and a projection camera, I could do HDMI to that camera, but you're correct that the TV screens are cheaper. Well, cheap, less expensive. We run things on a real budget. And but it's the interconnecting to that. So we've got in the balcony, we have the mixer, we do PowerPoint.
Mhm.
And so we do PowerPoint, and when we take the video signal, we match it to the PowerPoint to the side. So if we're reading the gospel, the words for the gospel are there.
Mhm.
The idea, one of the things I'm trying to do is, like, speaking into the camera is so important, and I'm not actually doing it myself. When you're looking down, or you're reading a piece of paper, or you have someone who's not experienced in doing that, and I've seen it in other churches physically, maybe even 10 years ago, where they had screens at the back and screens at the front. So the screen at the back was what the minister was actually reading from,
Yeah.
but allowed them to be looking out basically towards the camera.
Yeah.
And it's much more effective, much more drawing to have that. And how to wire that, like how can you bring all that together? As I said, we're using a YOLO box, which gives me, I'm using basically 2 HDMIs in, an HDMI out to a monitor. We have internet connected, and we're encoding as we go. So we do live streaming.
Yeah.
And it's inexpensive and fair, but if things go wrong, they go wrong so quick. You can't.
Right. So what you're going to run into is the problem of sending an HDMI signal more than about like 20 or 30 feet. The answer is that you have to use an HDMI extender, which basically takes the signal, the HDMI signal, converts it into a proprietary format, puts it over Ethernet cable, which can be quite long, then reconverts into an HDMI signal and sends it to your destination. And there are systems that'll do that with multiple destinations. So you can have one source, and then it goes to basically an off-the-shelf, Ethernet hub, and then it'll distribute it to as many sort of receiving stations as you want for that signal. And you can, and Cat5 cable is very cheap. Jeff is asking about SDI. Yes, SDI would be the solution that you would use in more of a broadcast kind of situation, whereas the Ethernet stuff is cheaper. Like SDI is a better standard, HDMI is cheaper. So, there's a trade-off there. I've had good success with the HDMI extender systems, or you know what, but the approach with those is like you go into it knowing that HDMI is like a consumer standard and it might let you down. So you kind of go into it knowing that, whereas with SDI you like expect more like reliability and you have more confidence. So there's a trade-off there for sure.
I guess on the HDMI, I would say that I have bought 100-foot cable optical
HDMI
for HDMI that works.
Okay. Yeah. So what you run into there is actually really not the cable usually. It's actually the source and like the dB level of the signal of that versus the receiver and its sensitivity. So it's often those two things matter even more than the actual cable, although the cables matter too. So you've got like 3 points of possible failure or incompatibility there. So believe me, I got boxes of HDMI cables. It's like
so what I would look for is give options, name parts, name specifics about what you're speaking about, and say, this church has done it, or this church is doing 3 screens. This is how you can contact them to find out how it's done, so that we can communicate with each other, because we can pretty rapidly figure out if we're playing in this with the same, deck of cards. Like if we're not in that league, we'll step back. But the whole thing is doing the best we can with what we've got. And
yeah, we can. I mean, one of the things that I worry about is that, like, when you go straight to case examples, they're very situational and contextual, right? Whereas when you talk about general principles, like what I was just talking about, like HDMI extenders. Like there's different options, Mark and Jeff are pointing out, well, you could do fiber optic, you could do SDI, absolutely, right? So it depends on like what's your budget, what how important is the reliability, like, what are the distances of the cable runs? Like maybe you can't do cable runs in your church, in which case you're going to be looking at something like NDI or some sort of more internet-based wireless kind of solution. So, we could talk about case examples, but there's a kind of a balance to be struck between talking about like fundamentals and like talking about specific cases. So yeah, but we can start putting together, lists of particular equipment that we know churches have used a lot of, for sure. Like the ATEM Mini is really popular, like for example. Yeah.
Thank you, Tay, for your wealth of knowledge tonight. And as we can see, we could be here for another 2 or 3 hours talking about different issues in technology, and I'm sure you could keep right up with us the whole time. So thank you very much for being here tonight. I've learned a few things about audio myself, and so I appreciate it, you being here. Greg, your hand's up. I'll give you the last comment.
No, he's just waving.
Oh, I see. I
Yeah.
see the way.
I'm just applauding.
Applauding.
Right,
Okay.
right. Thank you again, Tay. So if we can get the PowerPoint back up, and it's time now to kind of wrap up, and we'd like your feedback about tonight's pilot. And basically the question is, where do we go from here? Keep going, keep going, keep going. Yes. So where do we go from here after tonight? And do you see the merit? And I think we do. If you can go back to that other slide. The other slide before. We'd like your feedback.
There we go.
Okay, there we go. Okay, so we're going to put up an exit ticket that Tim's going to talk about in a minute. But these are some of the basic questions, other technical topics that should be addressed. And we're going to use this exit ticket format, and Tim's going to take over now and guide us through that process. So when we receive your answers, we'll provide feedback to you. And Tim?
Okay, so right on the screen right now, everybody, thanks for all the input. And I think Bruce is right on the mark. I think just us talking, I don't know if others have been quietly talking in the background, but I've been texting back and forth with people. Bruce, I finished my first extender HDMI to Ethernet project a couple of years ago. I was never more proud to see that monitor turn on 700 meters away on the other end of the church up in the balcony. But so we've all got sort of those, I bought them from Amazon, real cheap. We're like you. I drove to Toronto to buy a monitor from a guy in a house because it was $25 on eBay one night. So anyway, we're going to collect some information from you tonight to help us not only to collect some information on how successful this is or where we need to go, but also ideas in terms of where you'd like to go next. So you have a very complicated URL in front of you. I'm going to drop it in the chat as well, so you can click it hopefully or copy and paste it into your browser. As in all of our evenings, we do really appreciate the feedback. We get really good a frequency of feedback, so lots of great comments, and it gives us a good knowledge base in terms of where did you come in and where do you think you are? How was this helpful to you? What are other topics you'd like to cover? We meet and debrief and talk all about that. So please click on that link tonight and give us your thoughts. We do appreciate them. They don't go into the ethersphere. The good people at Google do package them and send them to us. So we do appreciate that.
So thank you very much, Tim. And there is the link there. Can everybody see it and open it? And there's lots of questions to guide you through, and you can provide your responses. And we really appreciate that. And we'll feed it back to you. So thank you for joining us tonight. And just a reminder that our next session is from engagement to efficiency, kind of wraps up our current series of technology and digital worship seminars. And you'll be getting more information with an email invitation and reminder that will be sent out in the next few days. So thank you very much to everybody, especially Tay tonight. And
Yeah,
thanks
bravo,
everybody for
Tay.
joining us. And Elizabeth, would you finish off with the whisper?
Oh, the grace.
The
Yeah,
grace.
we learned this from Little T and we've been using it. Thank you so much, Adam, and your team there. Let's whisper the grace. The grace of our Lord
Oh,
Jesus.
Lord Jesus Christ,
Love
the
of
love of
God,
God,
fellowship,
and the
Holy
fellowship
Spirit,
of the Holy
be
Spirit,
with us all
ever-
now and
evermore.
forevermore. Amen.
Amen.
It sounds like whispers from a cathedral when you're at the back and they're at the front. I just love
Yes.
that, Little T. Thank you so much.
Good night, everyone. It's been wonderful to have you
Okay.
with us. We'll see you.
John,
Thanks,
you wanted to
everybody.
say something?
Bye.
Bye-bye. John?
No, I was just getting the chat up, so I have the link. I'm on
Oh,
my,
Okay.
Okay.
And if anybody doesn't get that link, you can email me and I'll send it to you. If it's not working for you, because it might, Zoom and our systems are interesting.
Thanks so much. Well done, Dave. Thanks, everybody. Thanks,
everyone.
Dave.
Bravo.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Tay.
Tay.
You're awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Great. Nice to see you all. We'll stay on with the team, but we'll wish everybody else a good night. Thank you for coming.
Bye, Denise.
Thank you very much.
Bye, Julie.
Take
Bye,
care,
everyone.
James. I'll remove you, Joe. Thank you for coming.
Good night, Joe.
Great job, guys. That was very interesting.
Wow.
Jay, you're
Yes.
so good. Oh, I understood some of it. Good.
That's the problem with a technical topic like that. It's like,
Yeah.
you got to figure out where to pitch it, like to the relative skill levels. So I was
Yes.
trying to kind of hit everybody, across the, whereas if we had divided people with a
Yeah.
questionnaire ahead of time, we could have more narrowly focused on stuff. The problem too is that there's so much that's contextual. It's like, like Julie asking, what camera should I put at the back of the church? It's like,
I know.
well, I don't know what your